welcome to Fans of the Forge, where we are recapping Master of Arms, Season 1, Episode 7, the Arbalest Crossbow. So our smiths this week, we have Daniel Hamilton, who's a knife maker and part-time blacksmith, George Kramer, who's been blacksmithing for 15 years, and Rick Kennedy, who's been a gunsmith for 25 years. So we start off with the quick draw challenge. And, they are required to make a steel bow. History of this came around in the 15th century, and they started to appear from Europe. Had more tensile strength and more force behind arrows when fired than traditional wooden bows. So, and the bow needs to be forged from a single piece of steel, including a handle, and it has to be a recurve shape.
So, holy crap. You have to make a freaking bow out of steel.
Yeah.
And how, maybe was it 6 hours or 5 hours?
Yeah, something like that. I think
Either
6.
way, one piece of steel is, like, it's just baffling. I mean, clearly they did it, and it's done. I'm just thinking about, we have 3-piece bows, and it would be fine to, like, take the 2 pieces and lay them ahead, and then you have the handle. But to make it all one and try to keep it symmetrical, that's...
Yeah, you got to get these curves in there, have them be symmetrical.
Yeah.
And the right length, because you got to they're given a string, and then you have to figure out if the string's going to fit, how big is this bow going to be so it works properly.
Yeah.
Because you could screw yourself easily if it's too long, too short, you know. So.
Definitely a difficult challenge to start.
Difficult, yeah. So, Daniel, there's not a lot of notes for him. He was using 5160 spring steel. And the other note here is that he just does work. He's just working. They didn't show him too much. Moving on to George. He was using a bending fork to bend his bow into shape. He went with a vertical quench, and the oil made out of reached the handle portion of the bow, which could cause it to fail where the oil stopped. So when he did that, Trenton was like, whoa. It was like, this is...
Oh, yeah.
You know, here's what's going to happen if he's not careful. It didn't look like the oil went up. In fact, when he pulled it out, it was still... Part of the bow was still red.
Yeah.
It
didn't seem right at all.
Yeah. And then he goes for a kind of a burn-on handle. So he took 2 scales.
Yep.
Heated up the bow. Slapped them in there. Put it in a vise. Let the metal kind of burn the form into the scales. So they didn't have to carve them out.
It makes that
not a bad idea. And then he's still working on his handle, and Trenton accuses him of showboating when George attempted to pour a fancy handle while the bow still had a lot of work left. So he had the scales on. He had like some molten metal and a ladle, and he's pouring it over the scales, and he's like, he's showboating. I'm going to call him out on it when it's his turn to be judged. And then while torching the handle, he's got a torch out, and he's torching the wood on the handle, trying to, add some flair to it. Trenton says George will probably cook the string, and that's exactly what happened. And so...
it just lights it up.
A little piece came apart from one of the ends, and
But that's
what was he thinking? What the hell was he thinking? Yeah, take the freaking string off.
Take it off, or just don't do that. He still had a lot of work to do. I guess to refine a little bit, but Trenton was on point. He's like, dude, he's showboating. What's he doing? This is ridiculous. He's gonna burn a string, and then he burned a string. They're checking out Rick. He was hoping to make something that fires a bullet. So he feels slightly out of his element being a gunsmith. And he makes note, he's working from the middle of the bow outward. And George says, well, I'm doing the opposite. I'm working from end to end. And I mean, that makes more sense to me to work from one end and the middle and work out, because you're spreading the metal
symmetry.
outward.
Yeah.
His bow is a little too long, so he works on curving it a little bit further in order to get the string to fit. And then with an hour left, he kind of fits his handle onto the bow. I think I have notes on what happens. I think Rick kind of had a weird shape.
Well, did any of them have a recurve bow? Like
The recurves were there.
They were. I guess they were there, but like some of it was a little wonky on that recurve.
They were a little flatter than others, but they all had recurve. So, well, you probably know what the recurve is: a curve, and then it recurves.
Right.
They all had that. It's just
of one form or another.
Yeah.
Yeah, it may not have been as pronounced as to be really obvious.
Yeah. So for testing, each bow was going to be placed into a mechanical shooter, and then they will have an arrow fired towards a wall of light bulbs, and they were being aimed to hit the 2 red bulbs that are in the center of the wall. So neat idea. It's an interesting way to show if this is accurate or
They
not.
could have just had a big piece of wood, but then you don't get destruction.
So are we going to bring back the exploding target conversation?
Or even a regular, a regular artry target. they could
Regular
have
archery
shot.
target, yeah. a hay bale, with a circle in it or something.
But
then you don't get sparks.
yes.
necessarily.
Yeah.
So for Dan, he hits 2 bulbs left of the center, so he's not quite as accurate as he wanted to be. For Rick, one side of his bow was longer than the other, and he had a wonky shape, so that was kind of the wonkiness that we were talking about. The handle is also off-center, and so the whole apparatus had to be adjusted just for him to be able to shoot it.
Yeah.
The arrow flies low, but is only off by 1 bulb.
Yeah, it just it just
Yeah, it
took
went
a
down.
nosedive down.
And then George, Ashley actually turned away as the bow was cranked all the way back. Like she was nervous about it.
It was really tight and it was frayed, so
It was frayed, and one of the bows, I don't remember which one, it might have been George's, the recurve part was fairly flat, and so it looked like that string could just come right
yeah.
off.
Yeah, that's right.
it's crazy because Zeke is standing right there. He's not that far away from just like cranking this little. He's got this little handle. It's like you're really close to the
Like, I
danger
got
zone,
Safety glasses on.
Yeah.
dude. I'd be like,
a
no,
Jack
man.
in the Box. Anyway, for George, it hits the arrow hits several bulbs to the left, and then we move on to the judging. For Dan, he had one of the most powerful bows, but the notches may not have been filed down far enough because the string had started to fray. Trenton said it was the most solidly constructed bow with the cleanest lines and shapes, but each drill hole in the handle created a fracture point. So that's no good. For Rick, his bow did not have much power, and his handle was very off-center. And then for George, he had a very nice aesthetic, but burning the handle caused an issue with the string, which we mentioned. And based on all of that, Rick ends up getting the boot because of how far off-center everything was. It just wasn't as functional as the other 2.
Right.
So then we have the master build. They are asked to make a heavy crossbow, also known as an arbalest, with an oversized stock and steel bow came into use in the late Middle Ages. It must be between 35 and 37 inches in overall length. The bow must be between 29 and 32 inches, and the weapon must have a trigger mechanism and locking nut. So Dan is confident on the woodworking part, not so much on the blacksmithing part. He takes his time to make sure that the stock is perfectly flat and straight so that the weapon is accurate. He has issue making a trigger bar on day 2, but has better luck on day 3. And he gets the trigger mechanism working and is the 4th happiest he's ever been in his life.
Yeah.
So, and his order was what? Wife, first child, second child, and then this?
Interesting.
Something
Yeah.
like that?
Well, 3rd child, and then this was the 4th event, right?
Wait.
1, 2, 3,
Wife, 2 kids. Like 1 kid and then the other kid. And then the 4th was...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This was his 4th kid.
Okay.
This is a 3rd kid.
And so for George, he wants to work on the trigger mechanism first. He has his plans all drawn out for the build. He forges the locking mechanism without much issue, and has issue with fitting the plates on the side of the locking mechanism and gets slightly angry.
Yeah, because he had a pin going through it, and then he had some washers like welded on to hold it in a certain way. But then the plates were hitting the washers, so they couldn't meet flush up to the stock. Right. So and you're falling off, and it's like, "Arr!"
What's he like?
Arr!
Sounds like me. Anyway, testing. They were testing accuracy and velocity by firing a bolt into a mirror and past a chronograph, and the goal was to hit at least 100 feet per second. For George, his weapon feels good, except the locking nut seems to be placed very far back and could cause the bow to snap. Nick actually needed to get help from Trenton to pull the string back all the way, and then the arrow flies above the mirror, and the string snapped, but the arrow flew at 204 feet per second. So that thing was hauling.
It's hauling, and then the string just shot.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, it was
Single use.
single use crossbow.
use, yeah. And it was, I mean, that bolt was really far back. Or the nut,
Yeah.
where
Oh,
that pull
yeah.
string. It was crazy.
I think they both had issues with their whole triggering mechanism and where they placed it.
Yeah.
And then for Dan, his locking nut again is also set very far back. Trenton needs to get an assist again with pulling the string back. The arrow reached the target and measured 196 feet per second, but the locking nut was then completely stuck after that.
Yeah, and it rolled forward, and
So
it couldn't
another
be reloaded.
single use.
Another single use.
Yes. So, because both weapons failed, Dan and George are given 5 minutes to address their weapons' issues to see if they can fix it and make them
Operable.
operable
Not single
again,
use.
not single use again. Dan works to file his nut so that it won't get stuck, and George files his notches and uses a thicker string. And then they will be testing the trajectory of these using flaming bolts fired into a wood pile. For George, his flaming arrow landed a little short.
Yeah, it was like 15 feet short.
Little short. But then we move on to Dan. Dan's bow was very, very difficult to pull that string back on. So Nick and Trenton,
Once again.
working together to pull that string and lock it in place. And the bow broke.
It broke.
It snapped into
It
pieces.
was a violent break.
And it flew up, and it definitely seemed like it hit both Nick and Trenton with some of the pieces as they're flying
Yeah,
around.
I think it might have hit Trenton in the arm or something, because he was shaking his arm for a little bit.
So he got whacked good by that freaking crossbow.
And that was the thing that Zeke had mentioned as being the thing that everyone was like, oh, right?
One of the most dangerous
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that he was worried about. Like, that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yep.
so because the thing broke, George takes it and he gets to go home. He's the master of arms. George wins.
Yeah.
So
Winner.
winner, yay! Because you didn't almost kill the people that are the judges on the show, but
Right.
holy cow! So it was a very interesting ending to that episode, and of course, it was a very difficult challenge. Both of them were very difficult challenges. So, they did the best they could, especially if they don't have experience with that type of weapon. There's
Yeah.
only so much you can do. It seemed like, none of them must have made any sort of steel bow before, just based on any of the results. of
Yeah,
how-
it's
how
hard to estimate. Like, you have a piece of metal in a bow shape. How do you know how far back that should go? Based also on how long your string is. So you have to have it a certain way, a certain distance apart, and then you have to know that it's going to,
And I just think about the weight that it requires for our recurve bows. How much weight is required to pull that back? And it's not like they're super hard to pull back, but as they get bigger, they can get a pretty high weight, and that's just with a composite or wood bow. Never mind a solid piece of steel that you're trying to pull that thing back.
Right.
So that's really got to require a ridiculous high poundage rating or something to be able to get that back. And
Were there later versions that had kind of a lever that would help pull the string back?
on the crossbows, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen those.
And I was just thinking about the math of it. Like, you could figure out how far back that nut would have to be, because they gave them the limb parameters
Right.
and the string length
Yep.
parameter, so that you would have to just calculate. So it wouldn't be too difficult to pull the string back.
Yeah, but then,
But then you also aren't getting the draw weight to have it go as fast as it did.
right, you need to
Right.
hope
Yeah.
They only needed to get over 100. They were both well over 100. They were both twice that.
Yeah.
So if they had,
They could
cut
have
it
moved the
back
nut
yeah.
further up, had less speed, and still been
and
passing
much
the
safer
test.
and everything. So.
I mean, I don't know if they had the bows from the quick draw, but then I would have been like, okay, this, pulling that back and kind of just judge where it makes sense because you know where it's going to stop. Like, okay, I can't really go any further than that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go back 6 more inches, So anyway, crazy episode.
Yeah, but that was the episode. Thank you for watching. And again, that was Season 1, Episode 7, The Arbalest Crossbow. And guess what?
What's that?
There's only one more episode
Oh.
this
Yeah?
season. Yep, I just saw it.
That's it.
Ashley posted about it on Instagram the other day. Tomorrow night's when we're recording episode is the season finale. So that one looks crazy. I don't know if you saw the preview for that one. It showed Zeke with a World War I style. It looked like a sword, but it had the what's it called?
The knuckle duster?
The knuckle dusters on it, and it shows him punching and stabbing into a block of ice with like this big ass sword with the freaking knuckle dusters on it. So
that sounds like a fun time.
yeah, so we're looking forward to that one. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook. Check us out. If you listen to the audio podcast, leave us a review. Help get us noticed and that sort of thing. And to all those new listeners to the podcast that we've gotten over the last couple weeks, thank you for listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. And that's it. I guess we'll catch you. I don't know. By the time we record the next episode, it's going to be weeks after the finale airs.
So have a great holiday.
Yeah.
Enjoy the holiday.
See ya.
Bye.
I caught the commercial for Night Fight, and I really paid attention to it. It looks exactly like what Knight's fighting.
Oh.
It looks brutal.
It looks
Yeah.
brutal.